Hello, sleepy traveler. You've arrived at Nap of Nations, where the past drifts softly through candlelight. Every week, I'll guide you through stories of forgotten lives, quiet empires, and the peaceful rhythms of history. While you listen, tell me in the comments which part of history soothes your soul, or which ancient world should we visit next. I read every whisper you leave behind. Now close your eyes, and let's begin our journey through time. Welcome, dear listener. You've chosen to drift gently into a different time, a time of candlelit nights and cobbled alleys, of whispered prayers and royal decrees. This is not the Tudor England of grand banquets and glittering courts alone, but the everyday world, the cold hearth, the worn wooden spoon, the steady toll of the church bell. A world that moved by the rhythm of seasons, the fear of sickness, and the slow churn of royal politics. Let your thoughts quieten, breathe in slowly. Now, imagine yourself in the year 1532. You are not a noble, not a courtier, not even a wealthy merchant. You are simply alive in Tudor England. And survival alone is no small feat. Outside, the mist clings to the thatch. The pottage bubbles gently over a smoky fire, and the queen's mood has shifted again. Not cold exactly, but heavy thick with the scent of ash, wool, and the faintest trace of something less pleasant, the midden, perhaps, or the tannery down the lane. The bells from the parish church toll softly in the distance. You whisper the paternoster beneath your breath, unsure of the words, but repeating what you've heard since childhood. The queen is Protestant today, or is she Catholic again? You're not sure. Best to keep quiet either way. The hearth is the heart of the home, even if it smokes more than it warms. Waste is tossed into the lane with little ceremony, human, animal, all of it. A fine is owed if your cap is not doffed when the local lord rides past. All under the eye of the parish and the pressure of modesty, a woman's voice should be soft, her eyes lowered, her waist bound, her silence valued. And they do ride past from manor to manor, their boots polished, their horses high-stepping through the mud as if the world belonged to them alone. The gutters run with filth, and the rats do not hide. Children chase chickens, dogs bark. The baker's apprentice calls out prices in the distance. Beeswax is rare. Most must make do with tallow, whose odor clings. You bend low to gather grain, your back aching before the sun even reaches its peak. If your humors are imbalanced, you may be offered leeches or a draught of something vaguely herbal, possibly lethal. Many prefer prayer. The priest reads Latin, but you understand only the rhythm. Will the queen demand loyalty and then punish those who gave it? Still, you attend Mass, or its new Protestant equivalent, and pretend to know the difference. Souls are at stake, after all. You hear whispers, a noble executed, a rebellion crushed, a new marriage announced. The king's temper is legendary. Best to keep your head down. If you're lucky, there's a church festival dancing around the maypole, meat roasted on spits, and ale flowing freely. For a night, laughter returns. You wrap yourself again in coarse wool and drift toward sleep, knowing that tomorrow will be much the same. The cold creeps in through every wall, and warmth becomes a memory. Clay pots line the ledge, blackened from use, filled with the week's pottage, a slowly evolving stew of whatever can be found. Cabbage, onion, herbs from the garden, and if fortune smiles, a bit of salted meat or bone. It cooks for days. It never truly finishes. The floor is earthen cool underfoot, packed and swept, but never truly clean. Your feet find your shoes, if they can be called that, simple leather tied with twine. And as you push open the wooden door, the morning greets you not with sunshine, but with fog. You stir beneath your woolen blanket, stiff with age and coarse as a horse's mane. There are no sheets, no mattress, just straw flattened by sleep and time. The sweating sickness comes suddenly, fever, chills, then death in hours. The plague lingers in memory, returning now and again like an unwelcome guest. When it comes, doors are marked, families vanish, the dead are carted out before dawn. The air is damp. The rooster hasn't yet crowed, but your day has already begun. You rise, careful not to knock over the wooden bowl at your bedside, still half full of last night's broth. In Tudor England, the morning begins with prayer, or it should. There's work to be done. Your family is poor, not destitute, but close enough to it that hunger is familiar. The morning meal, if there's one, consists of bread dense and dark, made of rye and barley, perhaps mixed with peas or beans to stretch the flour. Butter is a luxury. So is ale, though you may sip some small beer barely fermented, just safe enough to drink in place of water, which is too often a risk. The fire must be stoked. Outside, the streets are narrow and mucky, especially after rain. You walk carefully, head down. For women, the day is a cycle of chores, mostly endless and repetitive. Washing, spinning, mending, child-rearing, bread-making. At midday, you pause for the Angelus, another prayer. Another moment to reflect and count your blessings, or perhaps just to rest your hands. The seasons govern all things. In winter, darkness descends early, and candles are precious. In summer, the fields beckon. Even small children help glean. But these are small joys, islands in a sea of survival. Disease is constant. Doctors are few. Their tools crude. A poultice here, a bloodletting there. Education is rare, unless you're a boy and a wealthy one at that. Most learn by watching, doing, repeating. And always, there is fear, not loud, but constant. Will the harvest fail? Will the price of bread rise? Will the tax collector come early? News spreads slowly by word of mouth, or from a town crier's barked proclamation. Night returns. The village grows still, the fire dims, and in Tudor England, sameness was often a blessing. Let us now leave behind the damp cottages and crooked alleys of the commoner's life, and drift instead into the scented, silent chambers of a Tudor palace. The stone corridors are hushed. The floors have been scrubbed. The tapestries do not flutter, for the windows are small and thick with leaded glass. The air is heavy with rosemary, lavender, and polished wood. Here walks Anne Boleyn, though not yet queen, in the Low Countries, and in the French court she absorbed more than etiquette. She learned charm, wit, poise, and that delicate form of political awareness that did not speak too loudly, but always listened. Imagine her, stepping lightly along the gallery of Greenwich Palace, her slippers nearly noiseless on the wax floor, her eyes alert, intelligent, and slightly distant. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, was a skilled diplomat. She was unlike the giggling, yielding ladies favored by kings. Her family's fortunes rose and fell with courtly favor, a tide determined by royal moods. Anne did not begin her journey in the shadow of a throne, but rather at the edges of nobility. As a girl, Anne was sent abroad, far from the green fields of Kent. When she returned to England, she brought with her not only French fashion, but a quiet confidence that unsettled and intrigued those around her. At court, Anne was not the most beautiful. She was slender, dark-eyed, clever, but not warm. She laughed often, but with precision. Her words were measured. Yet she caught the eye of Henry VIII. Slowly, steadily, she drew him in. And Henry himself, once besotted, grew cool. Her sharp tongue, her political opinions, her unwillingness to disappear quietly into the background, all became intolerable. Then letters passed between them, some still survive, their language careful, with undercurrents of longing. Courtiers gossiped in corners, England grew restless. She refused to become his mistress, unlike her sister Mary. Anne held herself apart. And the king, unused to denial, found this resistance intoxicating. It began as a flirtation, a glance, a gift. Henry pursued her with the persistence of a man unaccustomed to waiting. Years passed. The Pope refused the annulment of his first marriage. The chapel candles flickering faintly in the gloom. She is not yet 30. Still Anne waited. She prayed. She wept. She laughed, oddly, as if the absurdity of it all had finally reached her. Eventually, Henry broke from Rome. The Church of England was born not from reform, but from desire. Anne became queen in 1533, yet the crown sat lightly on her head. She moved calmly. She spoke gently. She did not beg. Her reign was brief. Only 3 years. During that time, she gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth, but no son. And in Tudor England, a queen who could not produce a male heir walked always on the edge of a blade. The whisper of her footsteps lingers in shadowed corridors. Her voice, once sharp, now only echoes faintly through the annals of time. For even in timber and stone, the fears of the age left their mark. Anne's enemies were many. The old nobility viewed her as an upstart. Others, loyal to Queen Catherine, whispered treason. The very charm that had once enchanted him now irritated him. Then came the accusations. Whispers turned to charges: adultery, incest, treason. So many names were dragged into the mud. Gentlemen of the court, her own brother. Trials in Tudor England were rarely fair, and Anne's was no exception. Witnesses were vague. Confessions were coerced. And yet the verdict was inevitable. She was found guilty. In May of 1536, Anne was brought to the Tower of London. Imagine her in the tower, the soft rustle of linen as she kneels. The air still and chill. On the morning of her death, Anne dressed in gray. A French swordsman was summoned, quick, efficient, silent, a small mercy by Tudor standards, and then she was gone. Her daughter, Elizabeth, would one day sit upon the throne that had cost her mother her life, but in this moment, Anne is still. And so we leave her, not in drama or despair, but in quiet remembrance. A woman who rose not by birth, but by brilliance, who fell not from failure, but from standing too close to the sun. Let us now shift again, this time, not to a person, but to the very walls and beams of Tudor England. Now, let us walk away from the grand palaces and silk-lined chambers. Let us step quietly through narrow village lanes past timber-framed cottages and crooked inns to the worn threshold of a place both sacred and anxious. An old Tudor home, or perhaps a chapel, or even the darkened passageway of a barn. You see it first as a faint scratch, a loop of lines worn by time. But look closer. It is not damage, nor doodle. It is a mark. A protective sign of a time when evil was not metaphorical, but real. A time when protection was not assumed, but made by knife and by nail, by ash and chalk. He lifts his compass, traces the wheel carefully into the wood. The lines are not precise, but sincere. A simple plea for safety, not unlike locking a door at night or whispering a prayer before sleep. A whisper scratched into wood. These are the witch marks of Tudor England, etched, burned, or carved by hands now long gone. They are symbols of fear and of hope. The most common mark is the daisy wheel, also called a hexafoil, a delicate flower-like design formed of overlapping circles made with a compass. Though gentle in appearance, it was meant to confuse and trap evil spirits, leading them round and round in a perpetual loop. Imagine a Tudor craftsman pausing before nailing a beam into place. The carvings are often rough, made not with care, but with urgency. Sometimes a cross or a symbol is repeated over and over as if written by someone in distress. Then there are the Marian marks interlaced V, S, or M, as symbols invoking the protection of the Virgin Mary. These symbols are not grand or ornate. They are not framed in gold or sung in hymns, but they are deeply human, quiet gestures of defiance against fate. They are often found near chimneys, doorways, and thresholds. Stillbirth, a strange wind, a bad dream, a rumor, a look from a neighbor that lingered too long. You step to the doorway and glance upward. Your eyes catch the faint line scratched into the beam above your head. In Tudor England, the line between the physical and spiritual was porous. The unknown was never far. Places where the line between outside and in blurs. Places where the unseen might creep. There are burns too. Deliberate scorch marks made with candles or hot irons. Small and circular, like tiny suns. These were meant to repel lightning or fire or worse things without names. To us, they might seem like superstition, but to those who lived through plague, crop failure, and the creeping uncertainty of Tudor life, such marks were not decoration. They were survival. Time has worn them, but not erased them. They persist, like the fears that carved them, and the quiet, hopeful wish for protection. And so homes became talismans, every beam a prayer. A place where fear wore velvet robes and drank from goblets of silver, every hearth a fortress. Even sacred places were not immune. In ancient churches across England, you may still find graffiti scratched into stone, the outline of a hand, the date of a harvest, a name left behind. One such mark, known as the apotropaic symbol, comes from the Greek word meaning to ward off. And what were they afraid of? Not just witches, but illness, fire, and famine. Imagine yourself in a Tudor village, the evening fire low in the hearth. Outside, wind rustles the thatch. The dog growls at nothing. You do not remember making them, but you are grateful they are there. And now, centuries later, many of these marks remain unseen above mantels, tucked behind paneling, hidden in attics and old barns. Let us pause here. Let the wind rustle gently against the old walls. Let the past breathe softly through dust and timber. And when you're ready, we will return to the courts of power, to a world of feasts, masks, and excess. And now, quietly, we return to the court. The soot-smudged cottages and scratched door lintels of village life give way to gilded halls and echoing chambers lined with polished oak. Imagine yourself moving through corridors lit by flickering torchlight, where everything gleams with a richness both beautiful and burdensome. This is the world of Henry VIII, a realm of ritual and indulgence, where food, fashion, and power collided beneath vaulted ceilings. Carefully orchestrated performances in which the king played both host and deity. To dine with Henry was not just to eat, it was to enter a theater of domination, where each course was a proclamation of wealth, each goblet of spiced wine a whisper of hierarchy. Banquets were not mere meals, they were displays, stages of supremacy. The tables were long, lined with crisp linen and heavy with silver dishes. Candles glowed above, casting soft shadows that trembled against painted tapestries and carved beams. Sweetness was a luxury, and sugar imported at great cost was displayed liberally. Swan, its neck arched gracefully, feathers reattached for visual splendor. Peacock too roasted and redressed in its iridescent plumage. Imagine the colors: deep purples, glinting green set against the warm glow of torchlight. Servants moved like clockwork, their steps muted across rush-strewn floors. All was controlled, curated, careful. Spices laced the fillings, cinnamon, cloves, and pepper. Imported from the east at great cost, spices were both culinary and symbolic, a sign of reach, of trade, of command over distant lands. Sometimes the king himself joined in, disguised, before dramatically revealing his identity. Even in jest, power had to be reasserted. Comfits, candied nuts, sugared rose petals. Wine thick with spice. The scent of warm cloves hung in the air, mingling with beeswax and crushed herbs. But what did they eat? A Tudor banquet might begin with a dish of gilded marchpane and almond paste confection shaped into roses or shields, sometimes painted with gold leaf. Dishes might be seasoned not for flavor, but to mask decay. Royalty, too, fell ill. Gout, indigestion, and fevers from undercooked game. Who sat where? Who received what portion? What gesture would be misinterpreted, What glance might be noticed? To dine at court was to be constantly observed. It was performance, laced with danger. The very indulgences they celebrated were the ones that eroded them. Then came the meats, a brief peace, a fragile serenity cloaked in candlelight. So many meats. Boar's head, served with its mouth propped open by an apple. There were pies, raised pies, shaped by hand, filled with venison or pigeon or minced beef. Between courses, entertainment. Minstrels plucked gently at lutes. Jugglers tossed fruit into the air, though always carefully, never daring to distract too much from the presence at the head of the table. There might be a mask, a theatrical performance with lavish costumes and masks, actors gliding through scenes of myth or moral tale. The final course, called the void, was served in the withdrawing chamber. Yet for all its opulence, even this world was not immune to anxiety. The food itself was often heavily salted to preserve it, and refrigeration was unknown. And behind the scenes, the pressure of appearances. Every banquet required preparation, not just in kitchens, but in perception. Even laughter could be strategic. And yet, in the hush between courses, in the moment when the music faded and the guests sipped their wine, there was stillness. It is this moment you may hold on to, not the gluttony or grandeur, but the quiet between, where history breathes, where velvet whispers against stone. And as the last goblet is drained, and the great hall returns to stillness, you may close your eyes to the weight of Tudor spectacle and rest in the hush that follows. Now let us drift to another curious corner of the Tudor mind, not the sharp, literate minds of the court, but the minds of the market folk, the shepherds, the washerwomen by the river bank, and the silent wives watching candle stubs flicker low, and where every misstep might be the work of a malevolent glance or a divine punishment. They lived in a world where illness had no known cause, where invisible forces govern fate. Imagine this. You feel a headache swell behind your temples, your skin flushes hot. You are not told to drink water or to lie down. Instead, a neighbor urges you to tie a sprig of rosemary behind your ear. A cunning woman might offer a pouch of dried mouse bones or the preserved foot of a toad. Mirrors were covered during storms to avoid inviting in bolts of lightning or something far worse. Shoes were buried in the walls of new homes, not for storage, but to trap wandering witches. You wear it over your heart, not as decoration, but as a shield. It may not work, of course, but there is comfort in ritual. Some even recited the Lord's Prayer backward, a strange practice believed to undo curses rather than summon comfort. In this world, every corner of life was infused with precaution. Children's cradles might be lined with rowan leaves to ward off spirits. When it rang during an outbreak, people clutched their children closer and whispered beneath their breath. The line between religion and magic blurred gently in Tudor life. Holy water might be sprinkled at the threshold of a new home, prayers muttered not only for salvation, but protection from all things unseen. Let us linger a moment longer in this twilight world. And at the center of it all was the bell. The church bell did not merely mark time. It was a word, a protector, a voice that echoed across valleys to drive away plague, evil, and death. The streets of a Tudor town at night were thick with this unseen tension. Dark, crooked lanes, low whispers. Closed shutters. Strange shapes left at the corners of doorways. Bundles of herbs, lines drawn with chalk, bowls of water to reflect and trap. Even in their superstition, there was rhythm, order, a deep instinctive desire to understand and survive. And yet most did not, because you see, no matter how tightly the poppet was tied, or how faithfully the herbs were hung from rafters, there was always a force stronger than magic. Sometimes it came on the breath of a stranger, sometimes it wore a crown, and sometimes it lived inside you, feverish, hidden, and unstoppable. But before we speak of kings and tyranny, let the whisper of Tudor superstition lull you for a while longer. And now let us gently shift our gaze. Now let us pass through the heavy oaken doors of the palace, not with a trumpet nor the flurry of servants, but softly. A whisper beneath tapestries, a shadow on the polished floors of Hampton Court. Inside you will not find safety, though the walls are thick and the windows latticed with glass. Inside, you will find cold smiles, silken sleeves, and 1,000 invisible daggers. To be noble in Tudor England was to live among predators in silk. Your shoes are made of leather. Your collar is stiff with starch. You walk carefully because each step in court is watched, each glance interpreted, each word remembered. Imagine yourself dressed not in rags, but in tight bodice and jewel-toned kirtle. And you eat well. Yes, roast goose, stewed quince, custards dusted with sugar. But your hands shake as you hold the goblet. Not his advisors, not his wives, sometimes not even himself, because above you sits a man who trusts no one. King Henry VIII, red-bearded, broad-chested and prone to mood and malice. At his court, the greatest luxury was not gold or jewels, but favor. And favor could vanish as quickly as candlelight in a draught. You might be the queen one morning, and gone by nightfall. A whispered accusation, a rumor twisted into a rope. A gaze from the king just slightly too long, and you would not sleep again. Many courtiers lived in borrowed splendor, desperate to rise a step higher without falling off the edge. Treason was not always a deed. Sometimes it was simply a look, or a book, or a friendship no longer convenient. And so the nobles of Tudor England smiled when they wanted to scream. It lingered in the perfumed air. They danced when their feet ached. They flattered men they despised. They wiped blood from sheets and escorted weeping ladies through secret passages. Their eyes were open, but they saw nothing. Their ears heard treason daily, but lips stayed sealed. They watched the scaffold rise on Tower Hill and prayed that it was not for them. Servants, too, learned silence. They carried messages, dressed hair, prepared poisons without asking. Power, it hummed in the tapestries. And if you survived the pottage and the plague, it was power that would undo you. For the final fatal truth of Tudor England is this: whether peasant or noble, servant or queen, you did not belong to yourself. You belonged to the mood of the king, and his mood changed with the wind. And so our slow and silent walk through Tudor England draws to a gentle close. We've stirred the ash of hearths long cold, wandered the misted streets where pottage simmered and church bells marked the hours. We have watched the slow unraveling of a queen beneath silent stairs, and traced the faint, desperate lines etched into stone by frightened hands. A world where each breath was borrowed, each glance calculated, each season awaited with quiet hope or quiet dread. We've sat beneath glittering chandeliers and tasted the richness of a feast fit for a king, only to feel the weight behind the gold. Far from the plagues and the piety, from the whispers and the executions, from the wooden spoons and spiced wine. Bread comes without prayer, and kings do not hold your fate with a whim. Tudor England was not just a chapter in history, it was a rhythm, a tension between fear and festivity, between mud-caked boots and gilded slippers. Perhaps you imagine yourself now, lying not in a wooden bed near the fire, nor on the rush-covered floor of a great hall, but here in your own present moment. Here the air is steady. The candles do not flicker with uncertain wind. The long glances in a silent hall, the hidden carvings, the imagined protection, the laughter caught between worry and want, and still something lingers. The rhythm of their lives, the rising before dawn, the worn paths to chapel, the shared bowl passed hand to hand. You carry it now, a little piece of their quiet endurance, a whisper from a colder time softened by sleep. Let your thoughts drift like smoke curling from a Tudor chimney into the damp English sky. Let them rise and dissipate, weightless, quiet. The queens are silent, the fires are low. and the great door of the hall creaks slowly shut behind you. Sleep well, and remember the past is always just a breath away.